said you were going to.
Consider yourself lucky, Dave.
That's right.
I was not here.
That's right. All right, Tony, you're the man of the hour. We're waiting for you. We ready? All right, we'll rock. Well, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. This is Representative McSweeney and I. It's rare that we only have to look back 5 years of history for a verdict on policy choices. When economic recovery in earnest in the rest of the country began to accelerate, a tax hike born out of political expediency and patronage choked it off in Illinois. Despite a very clear message from voters that another tax hike is not acceptable to them, and as history is our guide, we now hear rumblings from the governor that one may be in the making. As part of a so-called grand bargain, which could be foisted on the taxpayers after the first of the year with a simple majority. This is unacceptable, and we are here to say that lame duck sessions should not be used for 11th hour tax increases, period. I witnessed, and David was there as well, then Governor Quinn, in the waning minutes of the 96th Legislative Assembly, huddle in the shadows at the back of the House chambers with a number of defeated lame duck legislators who had actually campaigned against tax increases. But these members then voted for the successful tax increase, and subsequently many of them ended up working in the Quinn administration. It literally made me sick. The actions of unaccountable legislators has been allowed to go unchecked for too long. This legislation will stop these backroom deals that cost the taxpayers literally billions of dollars. My bill, in company with David's, HJRCA 62, is a logical extension of existing law that now requires a supermajority of votes for legislative action outside the regularly scheduled legislative session. Any votes in any measure after May 31st require supermajority. This constitutional amendment seeks to extend those same procedural protections during any lame duck legislative session, which by definition are already outside the regularly scheduled legislative session, to votes concerning tax increases. It is only fair that those people who will face the voters be the ones to make the decisions in the regular legislative session. Lame duck sessions should not be used for 11th hour tax increase with a lower standard than even in the veto session. When the Quinn tax increase was approved, my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle correctly criticized the action of those lame duck legislators, as did many of the editorial boards. My friend Jim Durkin even filed similar legislation to this measure to halt this practice. Taxpayer advocacy groups like the Illinois Policy Institute, Americans for Tax Reform, Americans for Prosperity, and even the Illinois Chamber opposed the practice of lame duck tax increases. This legislation provides more responsive, representative government by limiting the ability of lame duck, unaccountable legislators to force a tax hike on our citizens. This change is long overdue and necessary to protect the integrity of our elections and to ensure accountability to the voters. I'll turn it over to my friend, Representative McSweeney, who will talk about his companion legislation.
The scariest words in Springfield are grand bargain or grand compromise. That's just a simple code phrase for a massive income tax increase. We need to stand up for our constituents, for the working people of the state, for the families of the state, and oppose raising the income tax. Raising the income tax will kill jobs. It'll hurt small businesses. It will, again, drive more people and families out of this state. We should never adopt an income tax increase. We should be cutting spending in this state. Specifically, we know that the stopgap budget that was approved in June has been a total failure. Over a $6 billion budget deficit has been forecast. Spending continues to increase. Over the last 2 years, the budget has increased from $35 billion to $39 billion, even though we don't have a budget. Spending is out of control. We need pension reform. We need to cut administrative expenses. We also need to receive more federal dollars for Medicaid. But now we have leaders behind closed doors, not in the open, meeting to discuss a massive income tax increase. That is the wrong answer. And the worst part of this is not only is the transparency lacking in these closed-door secret meetings, but the reports are that in addition to the secret working groups that met earlier this year, that they are talking about a massive increase in income tax during the lame duck session. What does that mean? That means that 16 lame duck members, those are members who are not accountable to the public, who are either defeated or retiring, will have the ability to vote for an income tax increase. That is absolutely outrageous. And at that point, starting on January 1st, it would only require 60 votes. So those lame ducks, 16 lame ducks, could be 27%. Not all will vote for it, but it certainly is a great risk that we have unaccountable legislators who could raise the income tax, drive more families, more people, more employers out of this state. It is absolutely outrageous that people are talking about a lame duck tax increase. Didn't Pat Quinn teach us the failure of an income tax increase? Also the failure of an income tax increase at the last minute. So I stand with Jack Franks. We stood together to defeat the progressive income tax. We put together a coalition and with a lot of other members. Now we stand to prevent a lame duck tax increase. I am hoping that we will have a hearing on our bill that will be able to also in his constitutional amendment, my resolution to be exact, and we'll be able to get people on the record, get them out in the open. My biggest problem is the secret meetings behind closed doors. We need a budget in this state, but we should be in session around the clock. The governor should have called a special session a long time ago, and we should be focusing on cutting spending in this state. So my view is we should not raise taxes. A tax increase during the lame duck session would be absolutely outrageous, and I stand firmly against it. We're certainly willing to answer any questions anybody has.
What's the guarantee that this thing's even going to get out of Rules Committee and actually get an honest hearing?
Well, here's the good news. It's out of Rules Committee. And what we're hoping is that we're going to hear it as soon as tomorrow morning in the State Government Committee. We'll see if there's action on the floor today on the suspension of the timing. So I'm hopeful that tomorrow morning we'll have a hearing on this in State Government. Jack is the chairman of that committee. Is very influential, and we're working together on this. So I am hopeful that tomorrow morning we'll be able to put members on record, and hopefully it'll go to the floor, because I'm sick and tired of the secret meetings. Come out in the open. That was the message from this election. Be transparent. If somebody wants to support an income tax increase in a lame duck session, they should come out in the open and say it. All these leaders' meetings should be televised, by the way. Why are leaders meeting behind closed doors to discuss a secret income tax increase? Absolutely outrageous.
I agree with everything my friend says. The nonsense has to end. The status quo has to stop. And what we've seen here is an absolute fiscal meltdown in our state because of these secret dealings that we've had in the past and how it continues. We need to change how this is done. We are both confident that if there's going to be a tax increase, which we both oppose, it should be based on those who have to face the voters and not those who can, what happened last time with Quinn. I mean, many of these folks who campaigned against the tax increase actually ended up on the payroll after voting for it. That is just an absolute, it's an insult to the taxpayers, and it should never happen again. This is long overdue, and I think together we'll be able to stop this insidious practice.
Absolutely. But again, raising taxes is the absolute wrong answer. I strongly oppose a tax increase, but doing it secretly, doing it behind closed doors, not being transparent, that is the wrong answer. So we oppose any tax increase, but especially oppose a tax increase during the lame duck session when 16 members who won't be around anymore, who won't be accountable to voters, will have a say.
The Democrats have said for 2 years that you need some new revenue and cuts, and the governor has said you need new revenue, you just have to do it my way with reforms. Aren't you two outliers? There's $10 billion in bills not paid. When we had another $4 billion or whatever coming in from the temporary tax increase, you were cutting away at the payment schedule,
Bernie,
close to 30 days. How do you get out of where we're at?
we're not being outliers. You know what's outliers is how the lame duck session has been utilized to do these 11th hour dirty tricks. For every other time outside of May 31st, you need to have a supermajority of votes to get anything done. It's only during this little window when people can be promised lots of goodies and lots of bad things can happen, that bad things actually happen. So we need to stop that practice. So
But you're also against the tax increase at all.
That's a different. I agree.
How does the state get out of the fiscal mess it's in without some more?
To be honest about it and quit putting stuff behind closed doors, we've both been calling for special sessions. We've both been calling for there to be meetings on the House floor every day, going through line item by line item. And they refuse to do that.
And Bertie, let me answer your question specifically, because what has happened over the last few years is we don't have a budget. However, spending has increased. So spending has increased from $35 billion to roughly $39 billion. The fiscal year 17 budget deficit forecast right now is about $5.8 billion. COCFA is working on a revised number. But here are the areas that we need to address. The first thing is we need pension reform. President Cullerton has a very good, solid pension reform program that I support. I also believe we need to reamortize, restructure the pension debt. We're putting $7 billion a year into a broken system based on an arbitrary schedule that was adopted in 1995. We need to bring more federal dollars into Medicaid. Greg Harris has a lot of good ideas on how to do that. We also need to complete the private audit. We need to reduce administrative expenses. So we need to reduce spending. But to answer your question specifically, I do believe that we can maintain programs and actually fund programs for social services. We shouldn't be cutting any programs for anybody below 150% of the poverty level. We need to address the big items, pensions. We need to address Medicaid. We need to cut administrative expenses. But having leaders behind closed doors negotiating a sleazy, lame duck tax increase that actually will drive more families and jobs out of the state is outrageous. They should open the doors, make those meetings available to the public, and if they're talking about a tax increase, then the public should know about it. I don't know anyone who believes that, meaning the regular people in this state, working people, the people of this state who are not only paying the bills and working, but are also the manufacturers and other companies who believe that we should raise the income tax rate in a lame duck session. Raising taxes is the wrong answer for all Illinoisans. We need a real budget, but we also need to address those items.
But that was getting everybody into one room. Isn't that just unwieldy? I mean,
but-
you have 177 people. That's
But Amanda, we've tried this leaders meeting for 2 years. The budget's increased from 35 to 39 billion. We have $10 billion of unpaid bills. We have these games back and forth of walking out, dueling press conferences. It hasn't worked. What I've found is when members work together, and Jack and I have worked together on a bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, we can get this done. What we should have is we should have an open rule on the House floor to allow all items to be considered. The governor can then show if he has the votes, and I'm supportive of most of his turnaround agenda items, but he needs to show he has the votes, and the Speaker should allow him to have his bills on the floor. But we also need to get a budget done. But raising the income tax rate is the wrong answer. It is absolutely outrageous that this is being considered in a lame duck session, when again 16 unaccountable members could vote for a tax increase that'll drive more people out of the state.
This was the dirty secret. This was the dirty secret why we went home during the spring session, and we claimed that we somehow fixed the deal. Let's go back a few years. When the Speaker put forward a budget that was $2 billion unbalanced, I didn't vote for it. David didn't vote for it because it was unbalanced. Then there was a $4 billion one. It didn't pass. The governor's was $3 billion unbalanced. It didn't go. Then the Speaker gets beat up for putting forward a $7 billion unbalanced budget, which we didn't support. So what was the compromise? An $8 billion unbalanced budget. Okay? The whole dirty secret was to kick the can down the road, to get past the election, to pretend that we got something done so schools could open on time in August, to give us breathing room, so then there could be the largest tax increase in the history of the state of Illinois, and done by people who are unaccountable. That is just wrong on so many levels, and we're going to stop it.
why are they unaccountable? I mean, they were elected.
Sure.
You'll be casting one of those votes.
Sure.
They're still in office.
Yeah.
Inauguration day isn't until the 11th, so why unaccountable?
Because right now, we have a higher standard when it's after June 1st, right? There's only a window of opportunity in January before the regular session takes in. I think that's anomalous. My bill and our bills would fix that anomaly that I don't think was ever intended for these lame duck things to happen. That was.
I think that the framers wanted to have a window of opportunity where maybe, okay, sometimes
To pass
in
some-
politics, you gotta have tough votes.
To pass some bills, sure, but I don't think they ever envisioned that it could be done with a simple majority with people who were going to be unaccountable.
And Amanda, let me be specific on this point. Is I stood up and supported Jim Durkin's legislation to eliminate the lame duck session altogether. And that legislation is a constitutional amendment. I'm a co-sponsor. I sponsored his bill a few years ago that would require the lame duck session to have a 3/5 vote. But having a tax increase, a massive tax increase, we already know it failed back in 2011, negotiated behind closed doors in a lame duck session, I think is contrary to what the framers of the Illinois Constitution intended. That needs to get fixed. That's what Jack's constitutional amendment does. My resolution puts us firmly on record that we should not raise taxes on Illinoisans. And specifically, we shouldn't allow a sleazy, lame duck tax increase that will hurt families and kill jobs in this state. People are hurting in this state. There's not even a question about it. We do need economic growth. We do need reform. However, we don't need to raise taxes. And I have been consistent. I've stood with Jim Durkin's legislation to eliminate the term limits, for term limits, number one, but also to eliminate the lame duck session for this simple anomaly that would allow a majority vote for a massive tax increase. So we need reforms like that, term limits, redistricting reform, but specifically we're addressing today eliminating a sleazy tax increase during the lame duck session.
Will this increase be worse than what we saw leading up to the budget impasse?
Well, it was a 67% increase back in 2011. If you look at what the secret working group document that was put out, they were talking about a 30% increase. They were talking about increasing it from 3.75 to 4.75%. That was
plus new taxes on services, plus taxes on sugary drinks, and a whole host of new taxes. This would be the largest tax increase in the history of the state of Illinois, and that's what they're trying to do under cloak of darkness.
And we need to make sure that we have accountable legislators making that vote. We just had an election. And it was very clear that the message, everywhere the Republicans picked up seats, our candidates ran against tax increases. If you could show me a Republican with all the money that was spent who came out and supported a tax increase, I would like to see that. So I think it would be disingenuous. I think it would be lying to the people if the Republican leadership came out for a tax increase. I am strongly opposed to a tax increase, and especially strongly opposed to this sleazy lame duck tax increase.
Representative Franks, can you address this notion that seems to become more the line? For a while, I think people said it but didn't believe it, but now given veto votes, that Speaker Madigan right now doesn't have a supermajority, that he didn't lose that by losing seats in the election because he's never really had one in the first place, in part because of members, specifically you. Yeah. And you get right in the microphone there.
I've always said that, and the supermajority has been a myth in the state of Illinois. Actually, it's been used as a club against the speaker, and he's never really used it as a sword. It's been used against him because many times the governor has criticized him, saying you can pass a tax increase any time you want. That's patently false. I've never voted for a tax increase. David and I stood against the millionaire's tax. They didn't even call many of these bills because I said I wouldn't vote for them. So the supermajority never really existed. So maybe, and I was hoping with my departure that maybe that whole rhetoric would go away and people would actually have to work together like Representative McSweeney and I do. And we need to get back to folks working together and being open and being on the House floor because it's become such a concentrated, centralized government now. Unless your name is one of the four leaders and the governor, you don't have much influence, if any, anymore. That was not how our government was designed. We were supposed to have been we all represent folks, we're all supposed to be involved. With these secret meetings behind these closed doors, it isn't happening. You know, and we've seen it for years where they drop a budget on your desk an hour before and say, vote for it. That's not government. It's awful. We need to change the status quo. We need to slay the sacred cows if we're ever going to evolve in government. And this is one way of doing it.
Was the supermajority in effect in any way? I mean, like you said, millionaire's tax, no, maybe budgets, but did it have any point whatsoever? Did Madigan lose anything by losing that?
No. Not at all. There was never a working supermajority, ever. I mean, Democrats, they're not monolithic. You know, for much different backgrounds. I mean, there's conservative Democrats, there's very liberal Democrats. It's a very large spectrum. I would suggest on the Republican side, it's a little bit more controlled, a little tighter, more of the same message. Democrats have, I think, different constituencies. So it never was a working majority, a working supermajority. So I'm glad that rhetoric is off the table because it was used in such a way that it wasn't helpful. It was used for political reasons and not policy reasons. And I'm hoping with these policy issues that we're bringing forward, that policy and the issues will become what we're focused on instead of the politics. The election's over.
Just a quick thing on your proposal of today. When would that be on the ballot if the General Assembly would be so kind as to pass it?
Mine would be 18. His will be
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Mine's a resolution. I want to put everybody on record. Yeah. Again, my biggest problem
18,
right now.
The general election at 18?
Yes, sir.
My biggest problem right now, Bernie, to be specific, is that people are behind closed doors negotiating these deals. And remember the last deal we got from the leaders? We got a stopgap budget that actually increased the deficit, that decimated social services, that set up this talk about a lame duck tax increase. So mine will hopefully come to the State Government Committee tomorrow. It's out of Rules Committee, and hopefully it'll come to the floor. Let's get everybody on the record. Let's get people from outside of the closed doors. Let's get them on record. Let's see who really wants to support an increase in the income tax with a sleazy lame duck tax increase that would be a lie to the voters. Not one Republican candidate ran supporting a tax increase. Not one. And to think that Republican leaders potentially would support a lame duck tax increase is outrageous.
Will either one of your proposals actually get a vote?
I believe so. We're right now, both of our my resolution, constitutional amendment, are out of Rules Committee. There will hopefully be a suspension of the rules, and hopefully we'll have a meeting tomorrow at 8:30 in State Government. And I'm looking forward to having everybody on the record, not only in the State Government Committee, but on the floor.
Did you support Jim Durkin for leader again?
I did.
He's doing these terrible things behind closed doors?
I look at the situation, Bertie, and I say that the leaders should make their meetings public, number one. I've been on record. I've been on record as opposing the stopgap. I've been on record as being very independent. So that said, I do hope that Leader Durkin keeps his word, because all the money was spent on these campaigns said the Republican candidates would oppose a tax increase. So that's one of the reasons that I want to put people on record on exactly where they stand on this issue. And I hope that Leader Durkin and the other members of the General Assembly stand by what they promised the voters of this state, that they would oppose a tax increase. So I can't wait to get people on record.
But Leader Durkin didn't promise that. I mean, some of the candidates he supported may have, but.
Well, I think they spent about $60 million opposing tax increases the last I looked. So that said, I think it would be a complete betrayal to the people of the state of Illinois if the Republican Party turned around and supported a tax increase after $60 million was spent saying we wouldn't do it. I mean, that would be an absolute betrayal, this sleazy lame duck tax increase. So absolutely. So I'm on record as opposing the Durkin stopgap measure, and I will continue to fight against tax increases. I'll continue to be independent because I want to stand up for the people of the state.
After President Obama was elected, there was a lot of talk, hey, this could be good for Illinois. We got a guy from Illinois. We just had a presidential election. Can I get each of your reactions to what the Trump administration will mean to Illinois, or if you have any idea?
He's your guy.
At this point, we'll have to see how things work out through the transition. We'll have to see who the cabinet members are. I think the most positive part of the election was the U.S. Senate staying in Republican hands. So I look forward to seeing what the president's agenda is, and look forward to seeing how the Senate is going to react to that. But I think it's too early until we see exactly who all the cabinet picks are.
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic on some of his issues where he's talking about spending money on infrastructure and roads, which we desperately need in Illinois, especially in my county. We're wearing a new hat soon, and we need to invest in our infrastructure. And I think President-elect Trump has made that one of the cornerstones of his administration, that he wants to be investing there. And I'm hoping that'll help also spur the business sector. You saw what the stock market's done in the last few weeks. I think people are bullish on that, and there might be an opportunity to create new jobs and invest in infrastructure. So I'm giving the guy a chance, and I'm hoping that he's able to accomplish those things.
And were each of you for your nominees in the general election?
Yes.
I voted for the Republican nominee for president.
Representative McSweeney, has the governor weighed in on your bill?
Not yet. No, I would hope he's supportive. I mean, he ran against a tax increase in 2014. In fact, if I remember correctly, because I was actually a supporter of his early on, is that was the basis of the campaign, was the sleazy, remember all the ads, the sleazy Pat Quinn tax increase? So I haven't heard from the governor, but I would assume that they're supportive. I would hope so, but I don't know that for a fact. You're going to have to ask them on whether they're supportive of my resolution. It's House Resolution 1494. If I'm allowed, I plan, meaning if it's authorized with the timing on the floor, I plan to call that resolution tomorrow in the State Government Committee. And if I'm allowed, meaning if I have the ability to do it on the floor, I am going to call it on the floor. So we'll get everybody on record. So I would hope, since the basis of the 2014 campaign was opposition to Pat Quinn's tax increase, that he would stand firm against this sleazy lame duck tax increase.
But he's been pretty open about saying we're going to need new revenue, but first I've got to have some of these reform agenda.
Well, I've never seen a specific revenue proposal out of the governor, so when we're talking about generalizations, I'm hopeful he's going to support my resolution. We'll get everybody on record tomorrow. I mean, we're going to find out soon. That's what the interesting thing is. But I would hope that he would oppose the same kind of tax increase that Pat Quinn put in place in 2011.
I think the governor's pretty much on the record as saying he wants a larger tax. These secret groups that we're meeting, we're talking about raising the income tax and creating new taxes on services and on sugary drinks and things. We oppose that, but if that's what they want to do, they should have that vote if that's what the governor's pushing. But it should not be done by lame duck members who don't have an interest, don't have to face the voters, where mischief can occur, and with a lower threshold than we even have in veto session and any other time outside of a regular session. So, if there's anything else, we appreciate you guys coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good to see you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Appreciate it.
You ask a Trump question. Wow. You ask a Trump question.
People are mentioning those numbers.
I'm looking at the stock market.
Well, everybody was wrong about everything.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Congratulations.
I didn't hold back on one, did I?
Easy. Easy. It's underused on public radio.